record. Okay, so we should be all set. So welcome everyone. I am Kenzie. I am on the Prospective Student Task Force for the NSGC Student New Member SIG. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I love this event. We did it last year and I loved it so much that I decided I wanted to do it again this year. And so tonight we have four really great panelists who have previously applied to genetic counseling programs, didn't match their first time, and have subsequently kind of gone on their own paths. So the four people, our amazing panelists tonight, are Sophia, Sarah, Ellen, and Kendall. And I am going to turn it over to you guys very briefly just to introduce yourselves. If you wouldn't mind just saying your name, where you're from, kind of a summary of your journey, and then what you are doing now. And I'm just going to go in the order that you guys first appear on my screen. So Sophia, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Sophia. I'm from Southern California, LA area. I would say my journey kind of started with genetic counseling at the end of my undergrad, kind of a little non-traditional with a non-bio major. I applied for fall of 2021, so at like the application cycle of 2020, didn't get in, took some time off to figure things out, and I applied again this past cycle and I matched to my program. So I'll be starting in a couple weeks.
Love that. Okay, Sarah, you are next on my screen.
Thanks, Kenzie. My name's Sarah Steuben. I'm originally from New Mexico. I was a genetics major in college. I applied for the fall 2021 cycle. I interviewed with 5 different schools, but didn't match any of them. And I actually ended up applying for a Master of Public Health at my top school. And I was accepted to that program. So I graduated in May 2023. I now work as a quality improvement analyst for the Florida Perinatal Quality Collaborative. So we work with every birthing hospital in the state. We have 105 hospitals that we work with. We help them with their quality improvement projects. So just improving clinical care, reducing maternal mortality and infant mortality and morbidity for Florida moms. And I love it. So worked out for me.
Thank you. And then Ellen, you are next.
Hello, my name is Ellen. I'm from Wisconsin. I know, oh gosh, I had to think back. I applied for my first time applying was for the cycle of fall 2020. So I graduated in May of 2020 from undergrad. And it took me 3 cycles to match into a GC program. So I had reapplied basically every cycle after. Recently graduated from my MSGC program in May, and now I'm a genetic counselor in cancer and cardio at Ohio Health in Columbus.
Amazing. Okay, and then Kendall.
Hello, I am Kendall. I'm originally from Maryland, but I'm in Virginia now. I applied to master's programs 3 times total, technically. However, my first round, I applied to the only 2 schools in Maryland. So, and I think it's like 12 spots amongst all of them. So I really didn't give myself the best odds. So I don't always, add that one on, but for the purpose of this, I will. So 3 times total. First time I applied, I didn't get in. That was 2018 or 19. It was my senior year and I graduated in 2019. Then I took a gap year, was working as a feeding therapist at Kennedy Krieger in Baltimore, at the Children's Hospital, and I did that for 2 years. And during my second year, I applied again, applied to 7 schools, got interviews at 5, didn't match with any of them. And then my third time, I applied to 15 schools, got 7 interviews, and matched with VCU. So that is where I went to school. Oh, in between there, sorry, I did a clinical genetic certificate at VCU for a gap year, and then I reapplied, and then I got in to VCU. But I just graduated in May, and I'm now working as a neurogenetic counselor at VCU.
Great. Thank you all so much. So for the rest of the meeting, the plan really is to just have a very casual Q&A. So for those that have joined us, if you want to start putting your questions in the chat, I can read those off to our panelists. But just to get us started, I was wondering if you guys would talk about, what advice would you give to someone who did not match their first cycle?
I can go first if you. So in terms of advice, I think the biggest thing that I realized each time I didn't match was that there was a reason. I was definitely devastated and, put a lot of time and effort and money into applying each time. But the 2 times that I didn't get in, there were I would not, if I got in the first time I applied, I would not 100% not have been as successful as I could have been or was, having waited and gotten more, real world experience, patient contact experience at, Kennedy, and then during the clinical genetic certificate, being able to be around genetic counselors, just like being a sponge with them, that helped. So, while it is terrible and, take your time to process go through that grieving process, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and, it definitely worked out for the best in my end. And trust me, if I were to have told myself this same thing when I didn't match, I would have been like, kick rocks, girl, because it's terrible. But everybody has their own, way to get to genetic counseling, if that's even, what you end up deciding to do. So, yeah.
I could go next. I would say just to really give time for yourself, take a moment. I know, like, getting that email, if you got that far to have interviews, getting that email that said you didn't match, or even if you didn't get interviews the first time around that you applied, still hurts and it still sucks, and it's okay to feel that way. I would say the advice I'd probably give is more just to take time for yourself for a moment and probably kind of like not look at your apps for a while. And if you're like, if this is kind of check in with yourself, if this is still something you want to continue to pursue and apply for, kind of like maybe take some time before you look into your personal statements and things like that to see if there was something that maybe you didn't like or something that you're like, oh, maybe that is probably what caused or something that didn't work out. I know I took some time, looked back at my stuff, and I went, oh, I kind of did exactly the things that everyone told me not to do. And that I think that's probably what caused me not to have interviews the first time around. And just to take time for yourself and to see maybe what experiences that you can improve on if there's something that you didn't have or there's something that you're really passionate about, to like volunteer or to pursue that first to see what you feel about that. And then if that's something that you can apply, you feel that is very important to you as applying for genetic counseling, to probably pursue that as well.
Yeah, I agree with both of those thoughts. I especially echo a lot of Kendall's thoughts as well. It was heartbreaking each time, but I think it truly worked out the way it needed to. I was a GCA for a few years before I matched, and I felt like having that experience like grew my confidence so much. When I did go into grad school, I also took a genetics graduate certificate course. It wasn't through VCU, it was through University of Connecticut, but that helped me a ton to like prove that I can succeed at a graduate level. And so, yeah, I think even though it sucks in the moments, I think the more, yeah, like real life, real world experience you can have is helpful. But to like second that, just also advocate for yourself and getting any feedback from programs. There was even some programs that I didn't even get offered an interview, but they had really helpful feedback for me based off the material that I submitted. I know nowadays the programs are probably getting a ton of applicants, so I'm not sure how detailed they get with their feedback, but like there was even one program I interviewed with twice, and after the second go around, I was like, this is your second year with me. Like, what was it that like you just really like I clearly didn't match to your top whatever. And she was like, oh, like we only can accept this many, but I was like, no, but like there was something that, I mean, I didn't say it so harshly, but there's obviously a reason. So even if that was like during my interview, if I didn't express enough confidence, and how can I improve that, and all that good stuff. So definitely try to get as much feedback as you.
I think in addition to what everybody else has said, my advice would probably be to be really honest with yourself. And obviously, in order to be honest with yourself, you need to take time to be really sad, right? Because it's devastating. But after that time has passed, being honest with yourself, because for me personally, I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so I realized that in the interviews, I wanted to be a genetic counselor so badly that I didn't really stop and think if it was a right fit for me. I was so worried about being the right fit for the school that in the interview, there were lots of things that I overlooked. And when I had that distance and I was able to take a step back and be honest with myself, I realized that each school that I interviewed at and each school that I ranked, there were really glaring things that didn't fit with me personally. And so having that honesty, I was able to recognize that, you know what, maybe this isn't the path that I want, even though I really thought that I did. And then of course, the other side of that honesty is just being honest with yourself about your life situation. I was not in a place financially or just in my life where I was able to take a gap year to apply again. That just wasn't in the cards for me. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It kind of sucks, but that honesty was really helpful for me to find the place that I did want to be in.
Yeah, thank you all for all of that insight. I think that that's really valuable, both from the perspective of wanting to reapply again, or to Sarah's point as well, truly looking inward and seeing, is this really for me? And if so, what do I need to do to get there? And if not, like, where do I want to go from here? A question that we got for those that ended up reapplying and eventually matching, what changes did you make to your application the second time around?
I could start. I did have quite a gap between my first time applying and my second time applying. Both was for reasons for me to improve. Others were just unexpected life events that happened that I had to take time off for. I guess the improvements that I've made in that time was I kind of really tried to kind of like introspect and like, okay, why do I want to be a genetic counselor? And what ways could I improve my application to do so? And that included me doing things like attending more webinars, talking to more people who are like genetic counselors, and having more support. Being a person who is the first in their family to graduate from undergrad and getting their bachelor's for the first out of entire family, it was a little bit more of like navigating for me because I didn't have anyone to ask like, how did you apply to grad school? And I'm kind of like the only one who graduated from college first. And having mentorship and finding a really nice mentor who was able to help me out and having them to look at my apps to see like what changes I can make and also brainstorm what changes I could have. And I also did other things that were kind of a little bit different from the first time around. I applied to different programs completely because I was like, I only applied to schools in California, and I was like, you know what? I'm interested in getting a broader perspective, and inclusivity and diversity also includes, for me at least, to expand my knowledge and my horizon. So I'm like, if that also allows me to have the information that I grew up with my own personal information of like being a non-bio major, being a little bit non-traditional, and going somewhere else and using those thoughts and perspectives in my program and learning from my program at the same time. I thought that would be very helpful. But I think just having a lot more understanding about the field, about why I wanted to be genetic counselor, rather than just having my CV filled with experiences, and those experiences don't have any value of to me, and me just doing them just to do them. Just doing those things and introspecting like why that was important to me. And I also started volunteering at a talk line around that time, after my first cycle, and learning and going through essentially Roe v. Wade while changes were being made, and how that affected me in the sense of how this can be very impactful in the genetic counseling sphere when laws change. How does that affect individuals needing care, and how preventative and primary care can be affected? I know that could be a little bit harder, especially with maybe now when we think about fertility treatments, and how kind of late last year about what happened with Alabama and how that could have had negative repercussions, and how fertility treatments can be affected in the news and media. And I think also kind of introspecting how genetic counseling can be in those fields as well outside of genetic counseling, and kind of really finding your passion for that, and also your passion for people.
Ellen or Kendall. There we go. Okay. Yep. Ellen, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say it's a really good question. Because it feels really easy just to like stick to what you have. Like you probably made a good general statement, or like, there's probably not too much you really have to change with your CV unless it was like really unorganized for some reason. So I think my personal statement was definitely the piece that I adjusted the most in terms of like initial documents that you submit for applications. And kind of like what Sophia had mentioned too, really taking that time to express what does make you stick out and what makes you unique. So even just like expressing some of your passions that you have, and why you feel like you would be a really great fit for that specific program as well. I agree that especially by my third time around, I applied to some places that I had never applied to before, because even though they weren't necessarily on my radar the first time, after like looking into that program, it did seem like it would align with my values or my interests. So I would say that. And then when you do get around to the interview stage, yeah, having those like relationships, those mentorships where you can practice doing mock interviews, and just making that a time to like really show your personality. Treat it more as a conversation, at least in my opinion, than like a formal interview. And I know that's easier said than done, but if you do it like that, then it's really a good way to show them who you are as a person.
Yeah, so definitely agree with everything that's been said thus far. Um, I trying to so my biggest thing that helped me during both rounds of, improving, whether that be like interviews or the application, because I feel like the first time I applied and didn't get any interviews, like kind of meant that clearly something was up with my application. And then the second time getting so many interviews but still not matching, what's going on? So I think the main thing that I did and worked on both times was my ability to self-reflect and like really dig deep. So, and like I will preface what I'm about to say next with I'm sorry in advance, but somebody like somebody said this to me previously, and it like hurt my heart a little bit because I felt very targeted. But I do think that it really helped me to hear it. So like my first personal statement, I want to say it was I didn't really change it too much, like the topic the second go round, but it was mainly like, you know, I loved biology and science, and I wanted to be a teacher, but then I found genetic counseling, and it's the best of both worlds. And like, I say it like that, but like that was genuinely my personal statement. And someone literally said, they hear that 80 million times a day. So getting that like realization that I have to, while that is a shared experience clearly among a lot of people, understanding like digging deep and trying to figure out like why you love genetic counseling if that is the route you go. So like, you know, if you dig deep and realize you don't really like genetic counseling as much as you thought, then that is also an outcome. But for me, it was like really figuring out what about the profession really drew me to that. And for me personally, it was mainly like, well, not mainly, but one of the big things was how we are able, as genetic counselors, are able to empower patients with knowledge to help allow them to advocate for themselves. And so like I think that that is such a unique aspect of this profession that we are able to, have such a deep conversation, even though oftentimes we want to have longer conversations, but we can. But, we have that time to connect with our patients more than other healthcare providers do, unfortunately, but fortunately. And so really recognizing that like that's why I love genetic counseling and just exploding from there. And then and I think like my personal statement was a big thing, but just quickly on the interview piece, I am someone who has quite a few, learning issues going around. So a lot of interviews were very challenging for me in terms of like one, my anxiety, and two, um like really being thoughtful and in the moment and not let like, I know stuff, just don't let it go out the window every time, somebody asks you a question. So practicing a lot for interviews, and I being a part of like school or university, I had access to like the writing center and like mock interviews through career services. So if, anybody pursues that route, 100% game changer. So, yeah, I said a lot. Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. And I think everyone's perspectives are so unique and so valuable to hear. So thank you all for sharing that. Our next question is for Sarah, and it's kind of two questions. So how did you decide to pursue a different career path after not matching? And what advice would you give to someone considering a different career path?
That's a good question. Questions. I mean, I think it's really similar to what the other panelists have shared about, especially speaking to, what is it about genetic counseling that you really love? And so there's like a couple different ways you can go with that. You can think about, okay, what is it about genetic counseling that I really love? And then what are other fields that have that? And for me, what it ended up being, it was a yes and. So it was, okay, here are these things that I like about genetic counseling. But for me, a big thing that I felt was missing at the time that I applied was there was not as much of a systemic focus. I was really passionate about equity. I was really passionate about these systemic issues. And, thinking about, okay, where can we enact change? You enact change at an individual level, you can enact it at a population level, which is what I ended up deciding on, but all different levels. So that's something I think you really need to think about, of just, okay, what is it about this field that I'm passionate about? What is it missing? And where can I find that? So I was really lucky because public health, they're, you know, similar fields. My CV already was really geared towards public health. I had a lot of public health experience. And I was really lucky that the school I went to had a really wide range of concentration. So my public health concentration is actually maternal and child health, which was amazing for me because that was what I always loved during my undergrad. And when I thought of myself being a genetic counselor, I thought about working in, you know, a prenatal fertility field. And so being able to make that switch to maternal and child health, but now I have it at a population level. Now I have the equity that I've been missing. Now, you know, I'm getting to make decisions that affect state policy, and hospital policies. That for me was what I had been missing in genetic counseling and what I was really excited to find in public health. And that's not to say that you can't work at a population level in genetic counseling, not at all. I do think that we need genetic counselors that have that equity, that population level focus. That's why I get so excited about the joint genetic counseling public health programs. But for me, at the time that I was applying, that opportunity wasn't there for me the way that it was in a public health program. So that's my advice, just to sum up. What is it that you're passionate about? Yes, and where can you get that opportunity?
I love
I
that.
have a quick little tidbit to add. It also doesn't necessarily have to be like a, if I don't do genetic counseling now, I'm never going to kind of mindset. Like one of the girls in my program, in my master's program, she worked in construction for many years and then decided she would like to transition to genetic counseling. So, you know, it's amazing how many avenues, like non-genetic counseling fields, help or slash have transferable skills for genetic counseling. And so, you know, just because you're not a practicing genetic counselor or like a GCA or doing something that's around genetic counseling doesn't mean you're not gaining like valuable experience in order to like be a better candidate in the future. And, you know, I know it can be like daunting thinking about like, well, am I going to get involved into a profession that's not going to be my forever job? And like, how long is that? Because I'm also a big planner. So I can understand that being weird to think about. But, you know, everybody has their own path and like, even if one day, well, let me back up. Money is a huge ish. I know it was for me. So part of the reason why I took that 2-year gap year instead of, you know, applying right away was one, to make money and like while also gaining experience. But I don't know if I would have been able to be, you know, like not eating ramen noodles for dinner every night if it wasn't for that like year of working. So, you know, also taking financial situations into account. And oh, one more tidbit related to finance. One thing I did, the reason I was able to apply to 15 schools my last round was because I applied for application fee waivers. And I like didn't know they existed, and I like sing their praises because, you know, the worst they can say is no. So always ask. And if they say no, then you say, okay, never mind. But I've got half of my applications paid for. So, okay, I digress. Carry on.
Sarah, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, sorry, I forgot.
You're totally fine. I just want to interrupt. No, thank you, Kendall, for mentioning that. I think that finances can play a huge role. especially if you decide to apply for multiple cycles. And so I love that you have kind of given a shout out to those fee waivers. Yeah, I don't want to second that. Everyone, do everything that you can, obviously within your time frame that you have to hopefully try and apply for those so that you can lessen the financial burden. The next question that we have is, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in your journey? And if so, what and why?
You can go first. I don't think so. I really don't. I am very grateful. I mean, don't get me wrong, I despise the match. It is the bane of my existence. However, I do respect it because I do feel that it works. And I guess my reasoning behind that is a little bit of what I said before. Like, I didn't get in my first time, and I don't think I was ready to get in my first time, and I think the match knew that. You know, and my second time. And then my third time when I ended up matching, I think the school that I ended, or VCU that I ended up matching with, they were not top 3 on my list. And I thank my lucky stars every day that I matched with VCU, because I had the most amazing experience in grad school. And I don't think I would have had as good of an experience if I matched with, you know, my top school kind of thing. So, you know, while it was a long road and an expensive road, I don't think, oh, and a little bit traumatizing. I think we're better for it, but that's just me.
Yeah, I agree with Kendall. I don't know if I regret too much. Two things that come to mind though is that I had some personal connections at some programs, and then I felt really hurt when it didn't work out. So I think even thinking about whether or not those types of programs could be a good fit for you. And also, I think just really practicing those mental health types of skills. I know you guys might know about like the Discord that people use for applications. And I would like look at that at every hour. You'd see people be like, oh, those VCU interviews are out, you know, and to an extent that was helpful to know, like, okay, maybe I didn't get an interview, but then like there were some programs where I got it like the next day, 2 days later. So then I was stressing like so much over like 2 days for nothing. So I think just like knowing what maybe some of those triggers might be, deleting those Discord apps, not participating in those groups, if that is going to better serve you.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely forgot about that, Ellen. So thank you for reminding me. That was, yeah, that was rough, especially like I'm at work and then it's like, oh, and then checking my email constantly. Maybe if I could go back, maybe be like, calm down. Your email will be in your email. You don't have to check it every 15 or 20 minutes because that's not helpful for you. Especially stressing about that was really rough. But I would say maybe overall in my journey, I mean, I guess, I mean, I'm only human. There could be times where I'm like, oh, I wish I did this in undergrad, or I could have done this longer, or maybe if I had this one experience, that could have helped me do this more. And it's understandable to think about the what ifs. I mean, we're only human, and it's okay to feel that and like to process those feelings as well. But I think ultimately, me not having the ability of getting interviews the first time around, me growing and experiencing with the experiences I had with volunteering and then my own personal life experiences helped me grow into the person that I am today. And that without that growth, if I did match that time around, I don't think I would be perfectly right, quote unquote, for to be a genetic counselor at that early stage in life. I mean, it makes sense to for me, like, oh, if I was younger, I'm like I feel quote unquote older because I'm in my 30s and I know a lot of people apply right after undergrad or maybe 1 or 2 years after. And it's like, oh, if I was younger, it would be quote unquote easier. But I mean, everyone's on their different paths. I've spoken with people who started around the same time as I have, started a little bit later in life. But I feel that with my experiences and me applying to different programs, it allowed me to match to the program that I really felt a great connection with during interviews, and that I feel that I could really grow into a greater person that I am today, and to learn and provide better insight. And that a couple weeks ago, I had the ability to talk with all the faculty and some of my incoming cohort, and it kind of made me go, okay, I think this is the best choice, the best path for me, and I felt very comfortable with that.
This is definitely a question that I have asked myself over and over again of, okay, what would you change? What do you regret? But honestly, my answer is that I don't regret it. I think one of the strengths of the genetic counseling program is all the prerequisites. I think they're very well-rounded prerequisites. The psychology classes that I took were extremely transformative for my personal life, and I never would have taken those classes otherwise. I think the extracurricular elements of the program prerequisites also helped me be a really well-rounded person. It helped expose me to really diverse cultures, people, groups, and just experiences that I would not have had otherwise. And so I'm really grateful for those experiences because they helped shape me into the person that I am. I also never would have moved to Florida ever if it were not for finding that program through the genetic counseling, application, and then learning more about the public health program. So I mean, I owe the genetic counseling program everything that I have now in my career. So definitely no regrets.
Yeah, piggybacking off of Sarah, it's just like maybe something of regrets could be just like not keeping my mind more open. I think, yeah, having that open perspective is really important, especially when you are choosing different programs. If it maybe wasn't a location or a thing that you weren't thinking of, the program that I matched to, which was Bay Path, I didn't apply to them my first 2 times, but then I did my third time, and that's where I matched. So just like keeping your curiosity open, I guess.
Okay. Next question is, how do you balance personal life and professional development, especially during challenging times like reapplying or choosing a different career path?
I would say, sorry, Kendall, do you want to go or? Okay. I would say I'm a kind of a big planner in the sense of like, I try to like, if I wanted more experiences or like to put applications and things, I like charted everything. Like I had an Excel sheet. I like put everything in my Google. If I didn't have my Google Calendar open, I had a digital calendar that I put everything in. So I made sure that I put things in the right order. And especially if you're in Pacific time, something starts in Eastern Standard Time, something starts in Mountain Time, Central Time, and trying to make sure that having those changes in mind while I had everything when it came to getting more experience was also really helpful. And then also if there was something that clashed with my work schedule, to be like either see if I could have someone switch with me or if it was okay to excuse myself to be in that sense, or if I'm like, if I have to miss it, I have to miss it, and that's okay, and not to beat myself over it, because in my mind it was like, what if this is the experience or this is the thing that got me an interview or like made people think that I was a good fit, and try to kind of keep my mind out of that mind headspace because it could also be very detrimental to my mental health. And then just trying to plan as best as I could. And I know sometimes getting overwhelmed, sometimes I slipped up and I didn't add something, and then I opened something like, oh, there's a like a webinar in like 20 minutes. I need to get home in like 10 minutes and like join. It's okay to not join. And if you do join, it's okay not to have your camera on, or like to just be there for a short period of time, and that's okay on its own right. Um, and then also just taking time for my own personal mental health, like doing a hobby that that you enjoy, doing something fun, watch a funny video or something, just to kind of like make that separation. Because if you're constantly doing volunteering, working, plus doing all these things to also improve your application, it feels like you can accidentally burn yourself out, and then it's just not good for your own mental health. So just trying to keep balance and chart things, see if what you can or can't do, and if there's something you can't do, it's okay that you can't do it.
I agree for sure. I also, like one thing that I think helped me, and like in a perfect world, we can, you know, get the best job for the meantime that has like really understanding bosses that will let you take off but I think the biggest thing for me was like long-term planning. So, because I always felt like the my biggest anxiety and my biggest like stress would be like, I mean, I feel like this is a way for most people, but like close to a deadline, or like, I felt like I was on like if I let myself do anything fun or remotely enjoyable, I was like wasting time and not, you know, I'm not going to get in if I blah, blah, blah. So I, something that I found was like my time that I spend doing, applications, whatever, is so much more like it's just better. Like an hour of me doing applications after I allowed myself to have some, you know, time to myself and do something that I enjoy, is the equivalent of like 3 hours if I didn't let myself do that. So I forget what the word is to describe that, but you know what I mean. So like really allowing yourself time to decompress and like prioritizing that, because if, sometimes there's going to be a time crunch, yada yada, and you're going to have to like bear down and figure it out. But, if you're able to spread those things out and, do little pieces here and there, um, I think it's much, much better for your mental health. But again, all in a perfect world. And I would be lying to you if I said that I wasn't up until like 3 a.m. one morning, multiple mornings. So, you know, do as I say, not as I do.
My advice for balancing professional development with your personal life would be to be really mindful about the opportunities that you are pursuing. And in that vein, to be goal oriented. So to take some time to reflect and say, okay, what are the skills that I want to develop? What are the, career opportunities that I want to have? Okay, this is what I want. How do I accomplish that? What experiences are going to get me there? I definitely fell into the trap while working on my applications of doing everything. And that leads to burnout. I've dealt with my fair share of burnout. And so now that, I'm starting out with my career, I'm trying to be really mindful about the opportunities that I pursue. And it's made a huge difference for me, for my mental health, for just the time that I have. And it's made the opportunities that I do choose that much more fulfilling, because I'm able to devote all of my energy instead of spreading myself way too thin and then not getting anything out of what I do. Because when you're sitting there in that interview, you're not going to be able to rattle off the hundreds of webinars that you went through. You're going to be able to talk about one or two. And so you might as well just make sure that the ones that you're going to are personally and professionally significant for you.
Yeah, and then I would say even mixing it with your passions a little bit. For example, one of the programs gave me as feedback. So it was during COVID, so it was when people didn't have as much like advocacy. experiences or like abilities too. And they gave me like a reading book list of different books that I could read on like different lived experiences. And I love reading. So I was like obsessed with doing that. I loved reading those books. I loved talking about those books and like what I learned in interviews. Or as Kendall had mentioned a lot too, kind of broke during that time period. And so even just like allowing myself to go to like a library, and checking out like a new place or going to a coffee shop, like a new coffee shop every few weeks. That was just like a fun way to like do something that I like to do. It's a new environment, new setting, like something I can be excited about. While also being motivated to, yeah, work towards those goals, work on your applications, all that good stuff.
Ellen, any books in particular that you would recommend?
Yeah, yes. I read a few. I think my favorite that well, there's two. I really like one called Expecting Adam, and then it's like a super long title after that, so I can't remember. I think it's Martha Beck. It's about it's like a Harvard grad. She became a mom and her child had Down syndrome, so it's kind of like her journey along that way and pregnancy when she had Adam, etc. But then I think my top one is called Inside the O'Briens. It's about a police officer who develops Huntington's disease. It's a really fascinating read. And I love that author. Her name is Lisa Geneva. She has like 2 or 3 other books. I think she's the same author who wrote Still Alice, which is like turned into that big old movie, but she always bases those off of like real life-ish type events. So they're always super fascinating and fun to read.
Thank you for the recommendations. It looks like, oh yeah, Sarah says that USF also has a summer reading list as well, so that you guys can also check that out in addition to the books that Ellen mentioned. A couple of you have mentioned kind of having mentors that helped you along the way. And I think that segues perfectly into our next question, which is what role did mentorship play in your journey and how did you find your mentors?
I could go. Actually, my mentor is in this chat right now. It's Kenzie. I met her kind of like last year-ish. I think in one of the NSGC events, and this was kind of maybe little bit before applications were due, so we had the chance, an opportunity to talk because I felt like I had an idea of what to do, but I just needed a little extra guidance, especially since my family was like, I can't really help you from here because like I don't know. And I was like, that's fair. And there's nobody else in my area. And I've been out of undergrad for so long that I don't really know anybody who's pursuing genetic counseling at this time. And having Kenzie like read over my applications and like us just talking to see like what I valued and how that was being portrayed in my personal statements. And then also really helping me getting down on word count because it's always that like 5 or 6 words that you're over and you're like, but I like everything. I don't know what to take out. And having somebody else kind of like look over it and like, oh, you can say these 3 words in 1 word. I'm like, great, I'll do it. And then kind of just being like that force of reason and also like the the comfort of like it's okay like to freak out now that you submitted everything and now you have to wait and it's just like so incredibly stressful. And then also having the opportunity to do informational interviews with other genetic counselors also really helped in the sense of like what advice do you give or like if you had the opportunity to change something when you did your application, what would you change? Just having the opportunity to talk to people is also really helpful.
Yeah, I think this is a trickier question because I was a GCA for a few years, so my primary mentors were the genetic counselors that I served essentially. And I know that not everybody is going to be a GCA and have that experience. But I think even just like reaching out to a genetic counselor for like an informational interview could always be a good segue if they're open, if you had a good conversation or connection with them, maybe by the end of it asking if they would be willing to review some of your application materials and chat about that could be a really great way. And I know you can find some people through the Find a Genetic Counselor through NSGC tool as well that are closer to you.
I feel like I also kind of have a unique experience that might not be super applicable to everybody. When I was in the clinical genetics graduate certificate program at VCU, I my roommate that I ended up having for that program was a first year in the VCU program, and she was literally a saint. So, I know there's not, a million Lisas running around like up for grabs, so um I wouldn't necessarily expect that, but I know genetic counselors, at least the ones that I've been in contact with in general, are like super willing to help. And like, if you're reaching out more often than not, they will either say yes to whatever you're asking or will help facilitate someone else that can help you. So, I would say like don't be afraid to reach out either, because I know that was like a weird thing for me personally, like not feeling super comfortable, like just messaging people on LinkedIn and stuff like that. But I feel like you guys are already, you know, doing a great thing by coming to these things, because I'm more than happy. I mean, I take boards at the end of August, so I will not be doing anything before then, August 24th. I'm terrified. Anyway, moving on. But after August 24th, happy to help. Happy to help. I Zoom. I'm not great at reading, but I can help a little. More like ideas.
Oh, my turn. Sorry. I didn't unmute myself. I've been sitting here thinking about people who I have thought of as mentors throughout my life. When I think about the professors that I really resonated with, it was the professors who really expanded our horizons as students, who really encouraged us to be compassionate, empathetic, critical thinkers. These traits that I learned through them that I wanted to carry with me into my career. I remember something that was really impactful for me when talking with genetic counseling students and genetic counselors was talking to genetic counselors with lived experiences. So disabled genetic counselors from other marginalized identities, or with chronic illnesses or genetic disorders. That was really impactful for me as I was learning more about the field. And then I guess kind of a nice validating moment is that I really think that my most impactful mentors were in my Master of Public Health program. So I also think that it's exciting to know that you have mentors that you haven't met yet. And if that's something that's important to you, really think about that when you are applying for programs and you're in interviews. Think about, okay, is this somebody I can click with? Is this someone that I can see myself learning from and that I feel connected to? That was something that I missed in a lot of my interviews, but I found it in the program that I chose. And that has been a wonderful experience for me.
I love that idea. We have mentors that we haven't met yet. I love that. Okay, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to challenge the panelists in 30 seconds or less. Any last words of advice, wisdom for our attendees tonight?
All experience is good experience. I was an anthropology major. I worked with seniors. I had no GCA experience. I felt that doing that also really helped me understand about grief, loss, and even with my own personal experiences. And those can be also very impactful in genetic counseling.
Say you can find your path in an unexpected place and you are able to make a difference and have a fulfilling career anywhere, whether that's genetic counseling or not.
Yeah, it's a hard season. I would say finding a good support system. It's good to have like those de-stressing techniques for yourself, but just being vulnerable with, a few close people that you can share, exciting moments, sad moments with, that's really important too.
Oh, this is hard. I mean, I guess really it's really important to focus on, while getting into programs is important, really prioritizing your mental health, I don't think can be stressed enough because of how, and again, I loved my program. I had such a great time, but it is mentally draining, emotionally draining. Like it's a lot, and it's, nonstop for 2 years plus. So, you know, sitting down with yourself and really making sure that that is, what you're willing to bite off. And if the answer is no right now, totally fine. It's way better to, have that realization before, spending the money and like doing all that, and, making the most of your experience. And, if it's not your time, totally fine. But, if that is what you want to do, and if you are, after you do all your self-reflecting and whatnot, if you find that genetic counseling is, the thing, then again, you you can do it. You know, it's really it's a lot, but you can do it. Focus on your mental health and you'll be great.
Amazing. Thank you all for that advice, and thank you all for joining. Before everyone logs off, I am putting in the chat right now, there's a link where, most importantly, you can thank our panelists for coming and sharing their experiences with us today. There's also an opportunity to leave feedback about ideas for future events. And then if you are interested in joining our mentorship program for this upcoming application season, to be kind of linked up with a genetic counselor to help you with applications, there is a section for you to kind of indicate your interest on that form as well. But otherwise, that is everything that we had for everyone tonight. And thank you all for joining us. And I hope you have a great rest of your summer. Thank you all.